Hello Casual Clixers, welcome to the introduction to my Playing Heroclix solo series. This video will cover the rules that go into solo Heroclix play, and the series as a whole will have several playtests to see if there's ways we can modify the rules to my liking. Eventually, I'd like to build up to a solo campaign or tournament style matches and see how that turns out. But for now, let's focus on the solo play rules. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get notified when future videos go live. Let's start by looking at the rules. Initially, I found these rules several years back, as over time I found it more and more difficult to get together with friends, and I began playing solo more often. And I thought right now would actually be a good time to revisit these rules as COVID-19 cases continue to rise, which may lead us to being quarantined again. I know there are online options, but I prefer to play with the figures I own, as it's just a different experience for me. I set up a scenario with two 300-point teams facing each other. I spent the first turn moving the figures up so I could use the following turn as an example. In this example, it's the hero's turn, so I roll the deployment dice as the rule states. Roll two 6-sided dice at the beginning of each force's turns. If the result is doubles, consult the combat event chart first and apply the results immediately. In this scenario, I rolled double 5, which means I have to consult the combat event chart first before the deployment chart. The combat event chart says to reinforce the friendly force. I should also explain that the friendly force is not referring to the good guys, but rather the active team. In this case, since it was the Justice League's turn, they are considered the friendly force for that turn. I mention that because looking at the combat event chart, it's possible for the opposing team to get reinforced even though it's not their turn yet. Looking at the reinforce rule, it says, add a new character to that force. The character must have a point value that is equal to or less than 25% of the game's build total. With its combat dial on its starting position, place that character in that force's starting area. I had the Flash sitting on the sideline for the Justice League and simply placed him anywhere in the starting area. Let's look at the other combat events that are possible before we move to the deployment chart. Rescue. Return to the starting area the KO'd character from that force with the highest point value. The character's combat dial is placed on its starting position, and the other force's victory points for that character are lost. If no character from that force has been KO'd yet, this event is ignored. And the last event is Rally, which says remove one action token from each character on that force on the battlefield. Remember that the combat event chart only gets consulted if you roll doubles and they can affect either team. So make sure you're keeping track of who the active team is before you roll. Next, let's consult the deployment chart. Note the value of the deployment die that is higher, or either in the case of doubles, and add +1 to it for each friendly character on the battlefield with leadership as a standard or special power currently showing on the dial to a maximum of +3. Compare that value to the deployment orders chart to determine how the friendly force may be used this turn. Normally I'd look at the 5 since I rolled 2 5s, but remember that Martian Manhunter has a leadership special power, so I have to add +1, meaning that I am going to consult the 6, which says unrestricted operations. Any friendly character may be giving any actions in any order during this turn as per standard rules. Any order. So thanks to Martian Manhunter's leadership, this turn the Justice League have unrestricted operations and can take their turn normally. If I had rolled a 5 without leadership, I would have to consult the frontline firepower, which says a character given a non-free action must be of an equal or lower point value than that of a friendly character given a non-free action immediately before it on this turn. Now I know it may get a little bit confusing, so I did put some notes in parentheses when you're consulting this chart. And essentially what this means is that whenever you use a character, the following character that you use after the first one has to be of a lower point value. So in this case, if I were to use Martian Manhunter first, seeing as how he's 75 points, I wouldn't be able to use anyone else because he's the lowest costing character. So the note I made on frontline firepower is you want to essentially use them from highest to lowest, meaning Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter in that order, so that way you can try to get the most effectiveness out of your team. Going down to number 4, it says Frontline Finesse. A character given a non-free action must be of an equal or lower point value than that of a friendly character given a non-free action immediately before it on this turn. And this is the opposite. This one forces you to move up from lowest to highest. Now if I had rolled a 4 and if I wanted to, I could technically still use Superman first, but that would mean that I could not use anyone else as per the Frontline Finesse rule. And don't forget to consult the actions right next to it, which says the player may use some, all, or none of the allotted actions. So you're not really being restricted that much if you roll a 4, 5, or 6. As you move lower, you do start getting a little more restricted. Looking at 3, it says conservative tactics. Non-free actions may only be given to characters that do not already have a token on them. If I had rolled a 3 in this scenario, I would not have been able to take an action because, as you can see, all 3 of the characters already have an action token on them. For 2, it says aggressive tactics. Non-free actions may only be given to characters that already have a token on them. So you can see how you start to get penalized the lower your deployment die is. And don't forget to consult the actions as well, which says the player must use all allotted actions if possible. So in this scenario, it's totally possible for me to use all the actions available since they only have 1 action token each. And the last one, if you roll a 1 on both deployment die, it says restricted operations, no characters may be used in any way, and no actions are allowed. Finally, you'll note that 3, 2, and 1 have an asterisk. The asterisk then directs you to route. On a roll of 3, 2, or 1, check the point value of the friendly force. If the point total is less than 50% of the game's build total and the friendly force currently has fewer victory points than the opposing force, the friendly force is routed and the game immediately ends. So let's continue with the scenario I had set up. As I had unrestricted operations with the Justice League, I decided to perplex Superman's damage up with the Batman, and I used hypersonic speed with Superman to attack Black Manta. Despite it being a low roll, it was just enough for Superman to connect with Black Manta, and the dreaded one-hit KO occurred. And thanks to unrestricted operations, I decided to clear Batman and Martian Manhunter. The villains then rolled the deployment dice with the result of a 2 and a 1. Since 2 was the higher number, I then consult the deployment orders, which says aggressive tactics. Non-free actions may only be given to characters that already have a token on them, which is both of them. And remember that the player must use all allotted actions if possible. So that means that I have to use both characters this turn. And I also have to do a route check because I rolled a 2. Now this was a 300 point game, meaning that the force total has to be at 150 points. Because if it's less, it means that they get routed. Luckily, Black Manta was only 97 points, so they don't meet the threshold to get routed yet. So play continues as normal. So there you have it. These are the rules to playing Heroclix solo. I'd be curious to see if you have your own solo Heroclix rules. Please feel free to leave that in the comments below. Remember that you can find the original rules on the website I mentioned in the beginning. However, I did clean these rules up a little bit and I made the images much nicer to look at. And you can find that on my website on Casual Clixin, which is in the description below as well. I hope you enjoyed the first video of my playing Heroclix solo series. I'll make sure to upload a full playthrough soon, so make sure you subscribe so you get notified when that video goes live. And as always, thank you so much for watching.